Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from anthonymorganti.com, and this is episode 54 of Photo Critiques. And in Photo Critiques, people send me in some of their best work, and I critique each image with suggestions on how they can improve it. And today, I'm pleased to critique the work of David Niedbala. David sent me in a lot of images. I'll get to them in a minute. I do want to make a note of that David's a very talented photographer. He sent me in some really great shots. And so I won't be so much giving him suggestions on what he could do to improve. I'll be talking about what he did that is correct or what is really cool and stuff that we could look for when we're shooting and help us with our photography. Also, I'd like to note that I peeked ahead. David's from Western New York, where I live, and 3 out of the next 4 photo critiques are from people from the Buffalo area. So I'm happy to critique work of people from my neighborhood, and plus I seem to, I know the areas where they're shooting, so that's kind of cool. So let's get started on David's work. This first one, one other thing I wanted to talk about is, for those of you interested, David told me he's been using a Sony NEX-5R. That's a mirrorless camera. So if you are interested in getting a mirrorless camera, you could see what kind of photography or what kind of work the camera could produce. So that's something to keep in mind if anyone's interested in that. This first shot with the Sony camera, very cool shot. It's a macro of the leaf. There's some subtle color in here. That's what I touch on in a lot of the other critiques, is we should always try to look for the light, see how the light is hitting things and how we could exploit the light. And in this case, the light was just subtle enough where it was bringing out some subtle colors in the leaf, and it's a pretty cool shot. This really neat shot, typical sunset, but we have this, this is a weed, I think, coming into the frame, but it's very cool, very well done. This too I've talked about in the past too. If you have things in the foreground of the subject that are out of focus, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, obviously it works. It's hard, it's kind of hit and miss usually when you do stuff like this. You could hit the preview button on your camera and it will give you an idea of what it might look like once you're, it'll stop the camera down, whatever f-stop you might be using, to give you an idea what it might look like. So that will help, but it's something to look for, something like this. So very nicely done. The next one's very similar, probably the same, day he took this shot also. Very cool. If you like one with some blues in it, this is the shot. If you like one without it, that's this one. So it's kind of, what your own personal taste. Another one, a very nice shot. This is selective focus. Again, we have the foreground out of focus, something very nicely in focus here. Very limited depth of field. You could see that David used an f-stop of 1.8, which is I'm sure wide open on this lens, so very limited depth of field. The subtle colors from the blurred out background is very nice too. It's a pretty cool shot. Great expression on both of the dogs. Very nice processing. The only thing is, David, we cut the paws off of the dog, so try to get all the dog into the frame. It's okay to cut off the blurred out tree to get the dog in. This, I would say, crop it down and get their heads in this shot. Very nice shot though, very nice processing. Again, selective focus. When you look for these things, you want to concern yourself with light, and he had some backlight on the subject, so it kind of gets this little frame like of halo of light on, very subtle on the subject, and then you want to look at beyond the background what it's going to be when it's blurred out, what you're going to do, and we have this nice pastel of color back here, so it's very nicely done. Very nice waterfall shot. Again, it's not bullseyed, so it's off to the side. We have the spill area, we could see that. Very nicely done. Very nicely done. When I first glanced at this shot, I thought that his shadow was in here, like holding the camera, but then I realized that's just the way the cut of the rock is. But that's something we all should be aware of. when you're shooting, make sure your shadow doesn't get in the shot. Like I said, this isn't David's shadow. He did a fine job here. But this is obvious. This is Lake Erie. These are some rocks. Very nicely done. Used f-stop f of 14 so he could get pretty much the whole frame in focus. Very technically well done and a very nice shot. This selective color, I've covered this in my Lightroom tutorials. Very well done. We have this colorful leaf right here in the sea of gray grass. Very well done. And this is a pretty cool shot. This again, selective focus. You're focusing on one thing. There isn't anything in the foreground in this time that's out of focus. But when you do stuff like this, you've really got to be careful about the focus. And you could see how good his focus is here. And you could even see like a light spider web coming off the plant here. So it's very well done. So you got to be. Usually you have to use a tripod to really nail the focus. And again, another selective focus shot. This one's a little busier than the other ones. We have this as in perfect focus. You could see the the little hairs of the part of this plant coming up. Very well done. Nice color. We are from the specular highlights from the background. We could see the diaphragm of the camera lens come in. So that's a nice effect too. It's a touch busy, like maybe this plant right here, kind of spoils it a little bit, but it's a pretty cool shot. This is a nice portrait. Obviously the eyes were reworked, but that's okay. It adds to the image. A lot of times you don't want to overdo the eyes, and I'm not suggesting that these eyes are overdone, but it adds to the image. The other thing is, typically with these shots, when you have this lighting coming like this, you'll have this dark area under here. So David did a nice job in either, I don't think he used any flash as I look at the eyes, so I think in post-processing he made sure this was brightened up. So it's very well done. Usually when you photograph a man, you want it kind of gritty looking, generally speaking. So he used the light to his advantage. It looked like it was coming down from the upper back a little bit, so it kind of went sideways across his face. Not sure if he used a reflector or not, but his face is very bright. So very well done. Very nice shot. This is a cool shot. Very nice. No lens flare. Usually, if you get the sun behind something, you could eliminate the lens flare. Very nicely done. Sometimes you could use lens flare to your advantage. If you get some lens flare, it could be like a leading line, the lens flare. So in this case though, the shot works very well. These backlit grasses here, very nicely done. In this shot here, sometimes your subject isn't as well defined, but your subject could be color, and that's what we have here, is this beautiful color on the lake. Very nicely done. Just very nice shot. You could see the camera performs great. It's a really nice camera. And this another macro. This the kind of classic drops on a leaf, and you can see at f of 22 the very limited depth of field you have. So you have to really use a tripod, and you have to be very diligent on focusing on what you want the subject to be. And David did a great job in all that respect here. It's another really cool shot. It's just nice reflection. The very calm day, obviously it was 1/60th of a second, so we have this kind of glass water here, and we have this cloud being reflected here and the trees being reflected. So it's pretty cool. This is an interesting shot. This is the Tiff Nature Preserve, which is like 5 minutes from my house. I like the color. It's real kind of a subtle pastel look, and also it looks like he might have turned clarity down, because it's not. I wouldn't call it blurry, but it's soft. So it's kind of a neat effect. It is, I think, slightly crooked. It looks like the building's going a little bit to the right. So I bring this side up a little bit. That's the only complaint or critique I could make on the shot itself. It's just slightly crooked. As far as it being soft, like I said, I believe that is the effect he was going for. So that's someone's artistic vision. I'm not going to critique that. you know, it's a cool alternative. I tend to always turn clarity up on all my shots, and every now and then I'll bring clarity down and make it kind of more soft looking, and it's kind of a cool thing to do and something to experiment with. This is still TIFF Nature Preserve. As you guys who probably watch my Lightroom or my Photoshop videos, I have this exact same shot. This is, they call these the mounds at TIFF Nature Preserve. This was actually garbage that was buried and capped, and they made grassland out of it. And often you'll see deer and, you know, different types of songbirds on this hill. It's pretty cool. And this path leading towards downtown Buffalo in the background. It's a nice leading line. I've mentioned many times whenever you utilize leading lines or receding lines, you kind of want something for your eyes to resolve on when you get to the end of the line, and you do here. You know, this is the downtown Buffalo in the background, and it's a, you know, pretty cool shot. And I think this is the last shot, and this is again a study of receding leading lines. We have the fence going away into the distance, and we have this here, and then we resolve on these people right here. And I always said, always try to get something for your eyes to resolve on. And this is the waterfront in Buffalo. This is an old grain elevator, probably built around the 1900s, and it's still standing there, and kind of a sore spot in a lot of Buffalonians. They don't like these old things standing around. They want them torn down and the waterfront developed, and preservation groups say this is the grain elevator was invented in Buffalo, so they want these things to stand. So it's kind of a neat shot. In, you know, it's just in the receding line area. So always try to look for that. Look for unusual perspectives like David did here. You know, got down real low to maximize the use of the leading line to resolve on the people. This, you know, photograph wouldn't have been near as strong if he stood up and then had this whole walkway as the leading line. It just wouldn't have been near, you know, as interesting at all like that. So always look for unusual perspectives, unusual angles, and you could see that a lot in David's work, where he used very unusual angles to get at something, and he used you know, selective focus a lot to isolate a subject and to make the scene more interesting. So I'd like to thank David for sending me in his work. I really enjoyed critiquing it. And remember, guys, that was a mirrorless camera, an NEX-5R. If you're interested in that type of gear, check it out. As you can see, you know, it does a great job. It's every bit as good as any DSLR, in my opinion. Thank you again, David. Thank you, everyone who watches my videos. I really do appreciate it. And if you guys have time, if you haven't already, go over to YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'd really appreciate that. And go over to my website, anthonymorganti.com. I'm trying to add stuff to it every day to help everyone with their photography. And that's it for now. Thanks a lot.